Chairman, as a new member, or relatively new member, I'm not sure whether it's my place to do this, but I've learned in my time here that the proper way to put forward amendments like this, if one is serious and not making political points, as Mr Cosgrove denies he is doing, is to consult the other parties well in advance so that they have the opportunity to discuss proposed amendments with their caucus.
Point of order, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
To be helpful, Mr Speaker, it may assist the member. There are many precedents in this House, in fact in this current Parliament, when whole pieces of legislation have been laid on the table where no one has seen those except the government. Look,
that's not a point of order. David Garrett.
Thank you,
Most
Mr Chairman.
Regency, we don't see.
Had we had the opportunity to, today is caucus day for all parties. Had Mr Cosgrove called me even this morning or yesterday, but more particularly last week, and said, look, we've identified these things which we don't like about it and we think could be improved, how about it? I am saying to you, sir, that I would have taken those amendments to my caucus. I would have discussed them, and we would have discussed them at some length. We would have got some information and some advice. But here we are today, this plonked on the table with no notice at all. So sadly, it quite clearly is simply an attempt at point scoring. I want to go on to rehabilitation, Mr Chairman, which was raised on the other side, and I want to put on record that our party, and myself in particular, regard rehabilitation, or the desirability of rehabilitation, as a no-brainer. How can one possibly argue against rehabilitation on any number of grounds? Compassion for both victims and the criminal, fairness, public safety, and if we want to get down to it, money. Because who would want to have more people in jail at 90 grand a year than we have to have? It's an absolute no-brainer. The problem then becomes, how do we achieve that? And sadly, Mr Chairman, criminologists are a wee bit like psychologists. They inhabit different schools of thought. There is the nothing works school of criminology and the things work school of criminology. But even the things work school acknowledges that you need to spend a ginormous amount of money to rehabilitate a relatively small number. And sadly, one thing that both schools agree on is that rehabilitation is most effective when the person wants to be rehabilitated. Now, unlike Mr Cosgrove, I haven't been to 40 prisons or whatever he said in question time today, but I've been to half a dozen in my time here, and in every single one I have seen literacy and numeracy programs. I have seen training. I've seen, not in every single one, in some industries. Arahata I was particularly impressed with a drug therapy group, and I'm actually corresponding with a couple of prisoners from that group about this very bill. So it's not true to say that there is no attempt at rehabilitation. We could do better. Indeed, I think we should. And I started to mention my experience just this morning listening to Judge Peggy Hora, who I didn't ask her, but I think she would classify herself as on the liberal and with a small L end of the California judiciary. She established drug courts in, she was at the forefront of the establishment of drug courts in that state, which, putting it very shortly and simply, substitute treatment programs for prison sentences. Because as she said in her lecture, it was very good, I didn't notice any of the Labor Party there. She said that when she first sat on the bench, she gave sentences of X and told them to go away and sin no more once they got out, and then they came back, and so she doubled the sentence, said what part of don't do it do you not understand, and then they came back and she tripled it and realised it was getting nowhere. But with drug offenders we're talking about. So she did some research, did some study, and decided that drug treatment was the way to go. And that makes plenty of sense. Plenty of sense. But, Mr Chairman, one of the problems, as Mr Cosgrove will be well aware, one of the problems with rehabilitation efforts in New Zealand prisons at present is that there is absolutely no certainty of sentence length. Because of the Sentencing Act 2002, every sentence handed down by a New Zealand judge, aside from minimum non-parole periods for murder, don't mean what they say. Very poor grammar, I'm sorry, but the House gets the drift. So someone sentenced to 4 years might be there for 1.5, they might be there for 2.5, they might be there for 4. So there's no certainty, and a lot of prisoners thereby, or for that reason rather, are not eligible for treatment programs. This, in a perverse kind of way, Mr Chairman,
David Garrett.
will change that. At second strike stage, the prisoner and the jail will know exactly how long they're going to be there, and by definition it'll be a fairly lengthy time. Mr Chairman, I've done a bit of research in Singapore, which has, and I'm afraid what I've managed to turn up is relatively scanty, but I think that this is a rough description of what they do. They have a 3 strikes type regime. As I've said before in other speeches, it is not an American baseball idea. It is actually an idea all over the world. And the Singapore program works like this, Mr Chairman. When the person comes in, they are assessed fully, their physical health, their psychological health, their numeracy, literacy, their education levels, and to the best of their ability, the authorities try to fix up what is wrong with that person. And they train them for a trade, or probably not a profession, but a useful trade. Let's say it's as a panel beater. When the person is released, there is aftercare, they get a job, there is follow-up, much the same as our parole system. If the person offends again, they come back for, by definition, a more lengthy sentence for special treatment. Now, that's not 25 strokes to the Rotan. It is effectively the authorities having another look at that person to see what they missed last time. And let's say, for example, they had overlooked a psychological problem and decided that the person would be better off as a mechanic rather than a panel beater. So they train him for that. And he's there for 6, 7, 8, 10 years, so there's plenty of time, and he gets work experience and he comes out. But if he comes back for a third time, Mr Chairman, he goes into a concrete cage and he stays there. That's it. Society says, we have put all of these resources into you. We have trained you for not 1 but 2 useful occupations. We have told you what the consequences of you continuing to act in this way will be, and that's it. Now, I would be a little bit surprised if too many on the other side would disagree with that. That's not what we have here yet. But speaking certainly for myself, I would be supportive of that kind of initiative here. As I said, Mr Chairman, there is considerable support across the House for rehabilitation. It's as Mr Hipkins corrected me the other day, it's motherhood and apple pie, not mom and apple pie. But the problem is actually achieving it. And that is the problem that we face. And sadly, we have now a generation of violent thugs who do not learn and will not learn. William Bell, Graham Burton, they're not unique. And we need to do something about them. And then when we can try and get some consensus, it won't be easy, on how we go about stopping the next generation. And there's no consensus at the moment. We have views on how you stop it. The Labor Party have completely different views. There's no consensus. Each side can cite experts and cite stats and cite studies and cite individuals that support their argument. But there's absolutely no consensus. While we try and work one out, we need to keep the community safe from repeat violent offenders. And that is what this is primarily about. And sadly, we need to think about rehabilitation second, Mr Chairman.
Cole Grant Robertson.
Very much, Mr Chair. I just want to firstly